Nyalche chenpo toto nyingmi shang, zonen manam chenpo, nyalche da, dankara darngam santo, shermar, tumba tukje chanla ki shiom sar. Nishan rawar zer ngi shangam sa, jawar tukji shanla yalaman, jime banzo shala soran. Gongkyo toban pora shinji lo, gongkyo toban pora shinji lo, gongkyo toban pora shinji lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Before we embark on our discussion of the profound Shurangama Sutra, there are one or two points I'd like to bring to everyone's attention. The first thing is regarding our ongoing study of the profound Shurangama Sutra. Please note that next Monday and Tuesday we will be holding 2 sessions. Following that, it is likely that we will not continue with the study for the remainder of this year. We anticipate resuming our discussion sometime around February or March of the upcoming new year. That is to say, if I don't pass away or encounter some unforeseen impermanence, because life itself is truly impermanent, so it's quite hard for me to say anything for sure. And it's hard for any of you to say for sure too. Everyone's lifespan is impermanent. Of course, those who cling to the idea of permanence think it's impossible for them to die. But for those who practice awareness of impermanence, they always keep this concept of impermanence in mind. In this way, next Tuesday will officially mark the conclusion of our comprehensive Shurangama Sutra course for this current year, and we will temporarily bring it to a close. I'm letting everyone know about this here, because some people only listen to the Shurangama Sutra lectures and haven't had the opportunity to attend any other classes or sessions as of yet. That's the very first and most important thing I wanted to mention. Now, let me proceed to talk about the second thing. This year in 2019, many of the various projects and volunteer work, including those in the field of engineering, are basically coming to a complete end. As for some of the other individuals, including some at temples and at schools, as well as volunteer work in other positions, it may not be possible to finish them for now. So here I especially want to thank all the volunteers from the Academy, no matter which group they belong to, whether their contributions are significant, or even those who have made the smallest efforts. I am especially grateful to all of you. It's not easy to volunteer with a sincere heart, and it's even harder to see things through from beginning to end. At the same time on my side as well, because in recent years I may have taken on a bit more work than before, or a little more than in previous years. As for the reason why, sometimes I think whether it's for all sentient beings, for education, or for the temples, if you truly want to accomplish something, whether it's in the field of construction or in many other diverse areas, including important charity work, you certainly need people who are genuinely willing to volunteer. Without volunteers, it's really quite difficult to accomplish these important things. Some volunteers work really very hard indeed. I truly feel that, especially for those of us who are genuine Buddhists, because the very nature of volunteering truly varies. Some forms of volunteering don't always seem entirely pure and don't appear to be directly related to spiritual practice or development. This specifically includes some educational work, as well as some dedicated work for the temples and quite a few other important things. In this comprehensive way, it may indeed profoundly affect study, contemplation, and practice. To these volunteers, I have also given some, whether it's in terms of future Dharma teachings, I try to offer support in every aspect, providing them with the greatest possible and most profound benefits. During the entire comprehensive process of attentively listening to these invaluable teachings, as well as in their future academic advancements and intellectual growth, particularly in these specific and crucial areas, I believe that in every place we will also support and cooperate. I am truly especially grateful here as well, because thanks to the many volunteers we have, many things that seemed unimaginable have already been accomplished. And in the process of accomplishing these things, indeed, whether as individuals or as a group, sometimes we truly encounter various kinds of issues. But I think this is quite something that all practitioners throughout history, in the process of spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings, have found to be a very normal occurrence. Such occurrences are also a very natural pattern. It's not just in our work of spreading the Dharma and benefiting others that we sometimes face obstacles and setbacks. In fact, throughout the history of the world, not a single undertaking has ever been completed from beginning to end in a truly and completely smooth or effortless manner. The same is true for worldly matters. Whether it's the realm of politics or the field of economics or indeed any significant matter in the entire world, in the actual process of doing it, there will definitely be some obstacles that we will encounter. So we absolutely do not find this situation unreasonable at all. Therefore, as long as everyone can genuinely accept this fundamental concept, we should strengthen our resolve. As long as the right conditions persist, we must keep striving. But once those conditions are exhausted, then there's no need to continue. There are all kinds of disturbances or entanglements in our hearts, but they're truly and completely unnecessary. The second important thing I want to talk about today is also to express my deep gratitude to everyone in various places. Some people have truly set aside their work, their lives, and many other things entirely in order to do things for the benefit of all beings. This is truly moving and admirable. What I'm referring to includes everyone, inside and out. And in many places there are people with such motivation. Some people do this quietly without seeking recognition, like a small hidden screw in a machine, but without it, the whole big machine simply couldn't function. Such irreplaceable and indispensable people who play this kind of role are actually very numerous. So today, since the year 2019 is about to arrive, although there are still a few months left in the current year of 2019, but here, if we consider the lectures on the profound Shurangama Sutra are paused for a while, there are a few important things I want to tell everyone in advance to you, whether it's people within our monastery or those outside, whether they serve the collective or act for personal reasons, or those who quietly dedicate themselves for the sake of sentient beings. I am really especially grateful to them. Perhaps I have indeed praised or thanked you in person, or perhaps because there are so many things to handle, I haven't really had the chance to say this to you, but in fact, deep in my heart, I always felt I'm always praying to the Guru and the Three Jewels to silently bless you. May everything go smoothly and perfectly for you in this life and also in the next. This is the second important matter. Now the third matter, if I remember correctly, it was last year at this time, either last year or the first half of this year, I mentioned in class, we currently possess a trilingual dictionary, one that covers Tibetan, Chinese, and English, dedicated to esoteric Buddhist terminology. For the past few years, I've had an intention to undertake the editing of this large project. However, this work has simply been continuously set aside. Last year there was a registration for it, but then, due to a variety of different reasons, it was postponed again and still hasn't been done. The day before yesterday, when I went to look for it, even the list of people who had signed up was gone. Today, once again, on our side, this mainly within the Institute, outsiders don't need to worry about it for now. Some Dharma friends within the Institute have made aspirations to help. The English part isn't urgent for the time being. We might discuss it later. Let's focus on the Tibetan and Chinese sections. Dharma friends have aspired to help. There were people who volunteered, but none ended up taking on the task. Perhaps we really need to take a closer look and establish a schedule for it. Some individuals have expressed their aspirations to provide assistance later on, while others volunteered earlier. For Dharma friends who wish to help, there may be a few requirements. One is that they should have a certain level of proficiency in both Tibetan and Chinese, a certain standard of language ability. If you don't even understand Gakka-gananga, then editing Buddhist texts in both Tibetan and Chinese probably won't be possible. In addition, you need to have a certain foundation in Buddhist studies. That's the second aspect. Thirdly, if we want to make this aspiration, we need to commit to editing the dictionary for at least 3 years. We have several Khenpos and Khenmos here, and they are also willing to dedicate themselves to this work. Actually, I have also translated a lot myself, both Vajrayana and Sutrayana Buddhist teachings. But as for Vajrayana teachings, there still isn't a relatively complete dictionary available right now. So if we don't have such a dictionary, it will be quite inconvenient to look things up in the future. That's why we might need to gradually and carefully compile such a dictionary. If we are indeed going to compile it, it will probably take quite a long time. As for Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro and the others, they are compiling a general use dictionary, which is for worldly matters, not related to Buddhist teachings. They have already been working on it for over 10 years now. So for us, we don't know how long we can definitely keep at it. But at the very least, however, though, it would be best if we could compile one focused on Vajrayana. For many of us who study Vajrayana, it will indeed be useful in the future, because every single time we encounter something that is whether it's during the process of translation, there are always some essential things that we truly need. That was indeed the third important aspect just now. As for the fourth aspect, absolutely everyone can participate in this important editorial meeting. Both lay people and monastics are welcome. Both men and women can join. For both the men's and women's groups, we can set up separate editing rooms and compile gradually. The fifth aspect is that we need to maintain both physical and mental health. It also counts as being able to endure hardship and work hard. They say to endure hardship, but actually maybe we don't need to endure too much hardship. It's probably fine. Maybe we can just settle for one meal at noon. As for the rest, I don't know. What they wrote is able to endure hardship and work hard. And then the sixth aspect is this indeed, is to love learning and have a professional spirit. This is still necessary, because you will also be learning yourself. But if you have no foundation and rely solely on this to learn, this is not the same as us teaching Tibetan language classes. So there's nothing we can do about this. As for the last and final important point, having some relevant experience in editing dictionaries, we might give priority consideration to that. We have a few specific requirements in this regard. When the class is over later, there will be a Khenpo on the men's side. At that time over here, just wait a moment. When each of our groups began to take the speaking quiz, you can register for this event here. Both men and women should register with the Khenpo. Once you register, submit it right away. And today they said a photo is required here. But if you didn't bring a photo, it's okay. We can deal with the photo later. Everything else should be able to be done right now. That's for today's. Some people had already registered last year, but this has been unfortunately delayed until now. So when we compile some dictionaries and write some books in terms of writing by the end of this current year, or perhaps write some comprehensive papers and also meticulously write about our valuable learning experiences, I suggest that some of our Dharma friends who have the ability to write books, whether you write in Tibetan or Chinese, or even in English, in this way your own, even the hardships and reflections you experience during your studies, if you write about those, sometimes it can still be quite profoundly meaningful. That's absolutely everything I wanted to share with everyone here today. Next, we will now begin the class. I felt that I didn't do very well yesterday, but it actually seemed to me that I spoke just a little too little. However, they said I spoke a bit too much yesterday. They transcribed over 14,000 words from what I said, but I myself am not very satisfied. Also, I felt quite tired after finishing the class. My health hasn't been good lately either. We had a meeting afterwards. A few Khenpos and Khenmos were whispering to me, but I felt like I didn't really notice, just kept going. So I was a little bit tired. As for today, I don't really know what content to talk about. Let's just see exactly how it all goes. So what is today's important topic? We are now deeply immersed in the Shurangama Sutra. Yesterday we talked about the 7 locations of investigating the mind. We were at the last of it. I think this should be clear now, right? Yesterday one of them was about coordinates. This particular matter of coordinates. At that time it truly seemed like I had explained it somewhat clearly, but not entirely clearly, I must admit. This coordinate is basically a point of reference. I think there are 2 ways to interpret it. One way to interpret it, if you look at the Tibetan Tripitaka, it's the same. For example, as just mentioned earlier, if the mind is in the middle, is there a dharma or not? Or you could say if it's outside, is there a specific marker? Is there a precise coordinate or not? If there isn't one, then it's like empty space. There's simply no way to establish it. If there is, then you could say there's something that serves as the center. For example, if my mind is in this particular spot, if it's in this very specific spot, when I look from the east, it should be positioned somewhere between the west and the east. You could certainly say that if this particular mind, if this central coordinate actually comes over, then it is definitely not between the west and the east. You could put it that way. Or when this coordinate shifts over here, actually this coordinate, you could say we treat it as the mind. There are two distinct ways to explain this particular concept. One way of explaining it, because we ourselves are human beings. As humans, we inherently have this mind. If my mind is truly here, then between east and west, if you move a little further east, then there's no longer anything between east and west. It's not the center anymore. If you keep moving it this way and then that way, so as it slowly moves, there is absolutely no possible way to establish a clear center at all. Or let's say the person is standing over here. When the person is here, the mind is between east and west. When the person is here, the mind is not between east and west. Maybe it's between southeast or between north and south. So when you look at it this way, this so-called center is only ever established in dependence on a specific reference point. Apart from being established in such dependence, it simply does not exist. So this is, I hope that regarding the 7 locations of investigating the mind, some Dharma friends, when I listened to the speaking quiz yesterday, some people understood it fairly well. Some didn't understand at all. They were just guessing blindly, yet they acted as if they understood. But in reality, if we don't understand, it's best for us to humbly ask others and listen carefully to what others say. When it comes to the more difficult parts, let those who can explain it better, let them explain it fully. That way maybe we can understand. After listening a second or third time, you'll understand better. So I hope that sometimes when we encounter things that are harder to understand, at those times we should review them multiple times. When I first started studying the wisdom chapter of Bodhicharyavatara, the first time I listened to it, it was especially difficult to understand, so I spent a certain amount of time on it. Later on, it seemed like I completely understood it. So sometimes for us, when we studied the valid cognition, it was the same. Every day has many difficult parts to understand, so we'd spend time on them, constantly thinking about them and consulting more materials. In this way, you should be able to understand better. Some Dharma friends say, Khenpo is reading a certain reference material, and as long as you read this one, it should be enough. But actually, I don't read one reference material. You've misunderstood that. Sometimes I actually read quite a lot. I hope that many Dharma friends can. If you have access to materials, read a variety of different commentaries, and also reflect more on your own. The 7 locations of investigating the mind in the Shurangama Sutra is very famous. Many great masters don't really explain much. If they don't explain much, then sometimes they don't follow the inferential reasoning methods of Buddhist logic. They just gloss over the literal meaning. But in this way, sometimes it may be very difficult for us to truly understand the meaning within. So this time our explanation should be considered among the existing commentaries, one of the more detailed analyses. Therefore, I hope that whether during our guidance sessions or after everyone has finished this, or if you really don't understand something, in the handouts that you prepare, most of the content has already been explained quite clearly. You should also take a good look at them. I saw that yesterday many people commented saying they had already taken a flight or gotten car sick. There were all sorts of different expressions. Judging from these expressions, it seems that no one has attained realization yet. In this regard, I hope everyone will pay more attention. Don't give up when you encounter something a bit difficult, like an old dog facing a bone, and then just stops chewing and leaves it there. You can't do that. We must have a spirit of inquiry and perseverance. We must understand it thoroughly and clearly. This is very important. If I can't figure it out next time, I'll bring this question and ask this person or that person. Next, let's do the 7th investigation of mind. Today we'll finish the investigation of mind. Ananda addressed the Buddha, world-honored one. In the past, I saw the Buddha together with Mahamodgalyayana, Subhuti, Venerable Purna, and Venerable Shariputra, these 4 great disciples, turning the Dharma wheel together with them. When turning the Dharma wheel, you would often say, the luminous nature of awareness and discrimination, the clear nature of mind, is neither inside nor outside nor in between. Therefore, it is nowhere to be found. Earlier, you said it is not inside nor outside, nor in between, nor even in the middle of the faculties. It is also not between light and darkness, as we discussed yesterday. It's not found between the faculty and the object. It's impossible to exist in that way. Regarding the faculty and the object, yesterday we mentioned two ways. One is combined or not combined. This method of analysis is something everyone should carefully consider. If they are not combined, here neither knowing nor not knowing, yesterday neither knowing nor not knowing. Actually, knowing refers to the faculty of the eye, and not knowing simply refers to the object. If it does not combine these two essential elements, then the mind is in the middle, and it is completely and utterly unrelated to the faculty, nor is it related to the object. In that case, its very nature would no longer truly exist. Maybe indeed, if I add this in the middle, that would be fine too. I'm not sure if I explained this clearly yesterday. Sometimes as I'm really talking, I even just feel like, my mind has already drifted off into empty space. So maybe I just didn't explain it clearly. But at this very moment, if your mind is truly in the very middle of things, but has nothing to do with either the faculty or the object, then that is neither knowing nor not knowing. That would have nothing to do with either the I or the object. And if it has nothing to do with either of them, then what reason is there for it to be in the middle? No reason for it to be in the middle. This is something we can see when we think about it. So here he indeed very clearly says, the mind is neither inside nor outside, and also not in the middle. In this way it is nowhere to be found and possesses nothing. So in this state there is no attachment to anything. This is the main issue discussed below. He says that this mind is unattached. In the Tibetan translation it is rendered as unobstructed. It means without hindrance, without any obstruction. Some great masters interpret it as having no place to settle. There are also such interpretations that say it has no fixed location. In any case, the mind does not exist either inside or outside. If it doesn't exist inside or outside, then it is completely unattached. There is absolutely no attachment to any particular form, or you could say there is no obstruction at all whatsoever. This is what is called mind. It is named mind. So if I'm truly unattached, then is that called mind or not? So I wonder, is being unattached truly the real mind? Am I making myself really clear? You should understand by now, shouldn't you? Ananda asked the Buddha a question, meaning that what is meant by unattached here should be, ultimately the mind should be completely unattached and free. Of course, the following analysis is still very clear. Then the Buddha told Ananda, you say that the nature of the mind that perceives, knows, and discriminates does not exist anywhere. Didn't you just say that this discriminating and clearly aware mind, inside, outside, or both inside and outside, none of these contain it, that it does not exist anywhere, that it has no inherent nature anywhere? Isn't that what you said? If that's the case, next, let's analyze the emptiness of the world in all the places throughout the space of the world, as well as the water, land, and flying beings in our world of sentient beings, whether we are talking about the ocean, the land, or the sky. All these various phenomena here refers to all the worlds of sentient beings and their environments. Or in other words, all things, whether actively moving or completely still, here, various phenomena, includes water, land, flying beings. These are the worlds of sentient beings. Then there is space, mountains, rivers, and the earth itself, including streams. These can be called the material world. So everything encompassed by both the material world and the world of sentient beings, all of these, everything, are called all things. Didn't you mention everything is without attachment? If everything is without attachment, what is everything? From space to the material world and sentient beings, all of the observable phenomena we currently have are collectively called everything. So, in that case, is your non-attachment something that exists or does it not exist? The concept of everything should be understood in this way. So, if the concept of everything is like this, and you just said that the mind is unattached, then if the mind is unattached, does this non-attachment exist? Is it a phenomenon that exists, or is it a phenomenon that does not exist, that is non-existent? There should be two possibilities. Within the material world and sentient beings, it is a phenomenon that does exist, or it is a phenomenon that does not exist. Let's consider the first case, a non-existent phenomenon. If it doesn't exist, it's like a turtle's hair or a rabbit's horn. If you say that in the whole world of material and sentient beings, the mind is a phenomenon that does not exist. If the mind is a non-existent phenomenon, there are many other things that do not exist, like a turtle's hair, a rabbit's horn, or the child of a barren woman. People often mention the son of a barren woman, but it seems the daughter is rarely mentioned. But the daughter can also be mentioned, and so on. These should all be possible to mention. For example, a sweater made from turtle hair. Such clothes would be great, but such a statement doesn't exist either. And as for a rabbit's horn, I was on the road. A rabbit's horn stabbed me in the stomach, painful. Such a statement doesn't exist either. None of these things are established. How could they exist? So as you mentioned earlier, if something is non-existent, then none of these things exist. How could there be no attachment? How could it be unattached? If you say there is no attachment, that nothing exists at all, attachment and non-attachment don't exist. So in this particular regard, we can say what you said is also meaningless. You could say it's entirely fictional, not even worth discussing. Saying it this way is a futile effort. It doesn't mean anything. Second, if you say something exists but is unattached, if you claim that it does exist, but it is unattached, then it cannot be called non-existent. In that case, it can't possibly be non-existent. It should exist. Because the unattached exists, the unattached is present. In that case, it cannot be called non-existent. You can't say it doesn't exist. If you can't say it doesn't exist, if without characteristics it is non-existent, if not it has characteristics, he says without characteristics. If it has no characteristics, that means it doesn't exist. Non-existence is simply non-existence. According to the Tibetan explanation, it's a bit easier to understand. Without characteristics just means it doesn't exist. If you say it is unattached, does it have any characteristics? If it truly has no characteristics, then its very essence doesn't exist either. If there is no essence at all, then there are no characteristics either. In that particular case, if there are characteristics, it exists. So how could it be unattached? If it truly, in fact, has characteristics, then it already exists. So how could it be unattached? What follows is all about if you really say what is non-existent is simply non-existent, and what exists truly exists. It has essence and characteristics. If you deduce it's not non-existent, it already has essence and characteristics. If it has essence and characteristics, it already has characteristics. If it has characteristics, those characteristics already exist. If characteristics already exist, why do you say it is unattached? If it is unattached, it would be something that has no contact or obstruction at all. But if it clearly has characteristics and essence, it would be a bottle, a pillar, or a teacup, just any material thing among all conditioned phenomena. It exists with essence and characteristics. If it has essence and characteristics, how could it be unattached? Actually, in this way, he can't really explain it, because what is being discussed here is the mind, the true nature of the mind and the essence and characteristics of the mind. Ananda does not acknowledge them. What we often talk about, original nature, emptiness, and intrinsic luminosity, he does not acknowledge such dreamlike and illusory essence and characteristics. If he does not acknowledge them, then it truly and really exists. What ordinary people recognize as truly existent things simply cannot be established on the mind. So regarding this, we should understand that actually the mind, if you don't recognize it, it becomes troublesome. When you try to search for it using conceptual thoughts, it gets troublesome. If you look at the entire process of the 7 locations of investigating the mind, sometimes you look here, sometimes you look there, but you just can't find it. So if you don't have a really good key instruction, if you don't have a pith instruction, when it comes to recognizing the true nature of the mind, you might end up getting further and further away from it. I personally have this feeling. Indeed, the 7 locations of investigating the mind in the Shurangama Sutra should be very good. But as for the final result, what is it really like? In the end, the mind just can't be found. No matter how you search inside or outside, you can't find it. Apart from that, if you really want to recognize the true nature of the mind, there are still certain difficulties because it is not section pith instructions, not like pith instructions, Vajrayana teachings, which point out the nature of mind. Although here it sometimes talks about direct pointing, but this direct pointing method is somehow different from our direct method of supreme secret teachings. In the foundation of great perfection, there is the direct pointing of the mind and nature of the great perfection. Those who have studied and thought about it should be clear. Therefore, one should know that all is free from attachment, as you just mentioned, unattachment. Then the so-called awakening the mind of understanding and awareness, there is no basis for that. It's simply impossible to establish. So you'd be much better off breaking away from this particular view. Therefore, based on the preceding words, the 7 locations of investigating the mind of the Shurangama Sutra have now been explained. Some great virtues also think this is a very deep. It can be said that it is like the direct pointing to the nature of mind in the Tantra. There are also some truly great people who believe this is consistent, are relatively similar with the viewpoints on breaking the 4 kinds of origination in the Madhyamika. For example, there was a master named Zhiyuan in the Song dynasty, Zhiyuan, with Zhi meaning wisdom and Yuan meaning perfection. He believed that breaking the 7 points is actually quite similar to the 4 kinds of origination in Madhyamaka. The first one, the concept of the mind, is not inside, and the third one, the notion of not being in the sense faculties, are essentially equivalent to refuting the idea of self-origination. Then the second one, refuting the external, that it does not exist outside, is equivalent to effectively refuting the concept of other origination. The 6th observation carefully examines the relationship between the various faculties and their corresponding objects, and the 4th investigation of the mind, these 2 distinct points, are considered to be about mutual origination, the co-origination of self and other, which is quite similar to refuting co-origination. Finally, the 5th one, arising from various conditions, and the 7th one, which was just mentioned, non-attachment, meaning the mind being completely unattached. These 2 are considered to be about arising without a cause, because without cause and non-attachment both refer to arising without a cause. Therefore, in Madhyamika we say, all phenomena do not arise from themselves, nor do they truly arise from others, indeed not from both, nor without any cause at all. So it's known that there is no origination. In the Madhyamaka Sastra, what is precisely stated, as explained in the Madhyamika philosophy, that all phenomena are neither self-arisen nor other-arisen, nor do they arise without cause or through co-origination. Therefore, all phenomena never truly come into existence. This particular method is quite similar, and this specific way of reasoning is quite similar as well. There are also such methods of explanation. Of course, this can be used as a reference, though it may not be exactly the same in every respect. But in terms of certain ways and methods of analysis, they are also somewhat close to concepts of self-arising and other arising. That is how we understand it. Up to this point, the 7 locations of investigating the mind have been explained. Next, at this very instant, Ananda, then in the midst of the assembled gathering, rose from his seat. From among the entire assembly of monks and bodhisattvas, because earlier perhaps Ananda was sitting there while asking questions, and then the method of seeking the mind was explained below. After the method of seeking the mind was explained fully, since Ananda kept asking questions, in fact we are especially grateful to Ananda because it was through his questions that the Buddha's Vajra words have been preserved for us. Later, he once again rose from his seat among the monastic assembly and then bared his right shoulder. As for baring the right shoulder, it means his right arm was exposed. Generally, in India, many monastics do this particular practice, and it is also a gesture of respect toward the king. For monastics, when facing their teacher or the Buddha, they also bare their right shoulder as a sign of respect. This is also a gesture of respect. Then he knelt with his right knee on the ground. As for kneeling with the right knee on the ground, it is done to make it easier to turn clockwise in a respectful manner. So first he carefully placed his right knee upon the ground, and then respectfully put his palms together in a gesture of prayer. With palms reverently joined, he humbly addressed the Buddha, and then began to speak to the enlightened Buddha. So what did Ananda say? He said, I am indeed the Tathagata's youngest disciple. Because Ananda, on the one hand, was the Tathagata's own cousin, it seems he was the beloved son of King White Rice. King White Rice had Devadatta and Ananda as sons. Some say he was the son of King Drona Rice. But as I recall, it seems he was the son of King White Rice. And then there was King Shuddhodana, who had Nanda, whom we often mention, as well as the revered Shakyamuni Buddha. Among them were also the King Amrita and the King Drona Rice. These 4 individuals were indeed brothers in total. Each of these prominent brothers had 2 sons, which meant that altogether there were 8 close cousins in their generation. Among them, the more well-known ones are the Buddha, along with Ananda, Nanda, and Devadatta. These individuals were also among their close relatives. He then stated, "I am the youngest among your devoted disciples." He was also the youngest among the brothers, I think. Ananda, in fact, was born only after the Buddha attained enlightenment. Consequently, he was still relatively quite young at that particular time, but unexpectedly. At such a young age, he had already become the Buddha's attendant. It's quite remarkable. He served as the Buddha's attendant from a young age. Among all the attendants, Ananda was probably the best at it. He also served for the longest period of time. He clearly stated, "I am indeed the youngest disciple. I've received the blessings of the Buddha's compassion and loving kindness. Now I have the opportunity to become a monk. Now that I have the chance to renounce the world, I still rely on the Buddha's kindness." As for relying on the Buddha's kindness, it means depending on the Buddha's loving kindness and compassion. It's what we often call a becoming very arrogant due to being favored. He had already relied on this kind of special loving kindness, compassion, mercy, and caring from the Buddha. So despite hearing so much, he had not yet attained liberation from defilements. Here it's because of this reason that I am still very well learned and knowledgeable. Should we use a comma here? It's fine not to, because I am very well learned and knowledgeable. My learning is extremely profound. We can also see this every time Ananda asks a question. He is indeed very knowledgeable and learned. But because he did not practice diligently enough, he did not attain the fruit of sainthood and did not achieve the true arhat stage. Just like the Venerable Master Uyi in his profound commentary on the Shurangama Sutra explicitly stated, at this time Ananda was still an ordinary person. By the end of the third scroll, he attained the first fruit. Then in the fourth scroll, we can clearly observe and find he attained the fruit of Sakadagami, the second stage. Later, after the Buddha entered parinirvana, wasn't it also Venerable Kashyapa who rebuked him at that time? He was not allowed to participate in the compilation of the scriptures. Ananda was experiencing truly great pain because of this situation. Afterwards, he practiced diligently and with great effort. At that time, because of his unwavering strong resolve and his deep and abiding faith, he finally attained the fruit of arhatship. Subsequently, Venerable Kashyapa entrusted the second assigned mission to Venerable Ananda as well. So, looking at history, when the Buddha was still alive, Ananda had not attained full realization all along. Therefore, sometimes indeed we can clearly see, what can we actually see from this? In this world, when it comes to spiritual teachers, the most remarkable one should certainly be Shakyamuni Buddha, but even by Shakyamuni Buddha's very own side, whether it was his close relative Devadatta or his own personal attendant, who was also his cousin, Venerable Ananda, when the Buddha was alive, he had never actually attained the fruit of arhatship. So sometimes for us, nowadays, in this modern society, what kinds of statements do we really quite often hear being made these days? So-and-so is a disciple in the lineage of a certain master, so they must be very remarkable. Or someone is a relative of a certain master, his brother, descendants, and so on. From these perspectives, or someone has stayed at a certain Buddhist institute. Nowadays, many lay practitioners, we often see this in Han regions, they don't observe the individual person, and then they say, this particular person actually comes from such and such a specific place. If they come from a certain place, that means they already have this lineage, have this blessing, have this ability. But sometimes this may not be entirely accurate. We also certainly can't say that there is absolutely no such connection at all. Maybe if someone close to the master is truly remarkable, perhaps they truly do have this actual lineage and blessing. Indeed, they have the lineage and the blessing, but perhaps even though someone is by the master's side or is a relative of the master, but their mind has never been set on the Dharma, and they spend all day distracted and restless. If this continues, then whether such a person has the lineage or not, it is indeed very difficult. So when we truly rely on a spiritual teacher, it's best to follow the Buddha's example of observing the individual. For example, if you want to rely on a certain spiritual guide, you need to see whether this person possesses the qualities of the Dharma. This point is indeed very important. I've often given this example myself. I think it's a really good example. For instance, if we want to find a kindergarten teacher, or a dedicated third grade elementary school teacher, specifically when we're looking for such a teacher, can we just pick someone who is a relative of a certain leader? Unless that person makes a special phone call, and if there's really no issue with it, then you really have no way to refuse. Even though this person may not necessarily have the right qualifications, but because they made the call, you have no choice. But if that's not the case, when we're choosing a kindergarten teacher, at that point we might say, oh, this person comes from a certain school or from somewhere else, but that's not necessarily reliable. Maybe in that school they never even earned a diploma, never really gained any substantial real knowledge. So sometimes when we ourselves rely on a spiritual teacher, Ananda himself said, although I have heard a lot, I haven't practiced well and I feel very ashamed. Even though the Buddha is very compassionate, he truly accepted me and indeed let me become a monk. But because I didn't practice well, without proper practice, it's truly very hard to achieve realization. Just like it says in A Grove of Pearls in the Garden of the Dharma, the wondrous Dharma spoken by the Buddha, I must practice it. If one can truly practice well, the profound benefit and ultimate liberation will indeed be immense. If we are truly able to practice well, even if you don't have a spiritual teacher as great as the Buddha, even if your teacher is just an ordinary spiritual friend with the qualities of Dharma, he may have the ability to awaken and to achieve realization. But if you yourself do not practice, even the Venerable Ananda, who was standing right in front of the Buddha, he too was always like that, apart from sometimes asking questions indeed, just like some ordinary scholars nowadays, some who are especially good at asking questions and talking, but in their own mental continuum, they have never truly and deeply integrated with the Dharma, which is really, you could say, quite pitiable. This includes all of us present here today. We cannot just become lecturers entirely. In theory, we may speak eloquently and endlessly, but in reality, if we don't even have a single moment of renunciation, or even a single pure faith in the three jewels, if we lack even that pure faith, then in the end, such a person will only have the merit of having heard the Dharma, nothing more. Other than that, they will not be able to cut the root of samsara, nor will they be able to eliminate the afflictions in their own mental continuum. So, from a personal perspective, we must seek out a qualified spiritual teacher who possesses the authentic qualities of the Dharma. This is very important. We should not choose someone just because they come from a certain Dharma center or because they are connected to a certain Lama. Nowadays, this is very common. People just take a photo and say, oh, this person took a photo with that Dharma king, so they must be very remarkable. So in the past, this has quite often happened in our own institute many times. They would take a photo here with the whole scene of the institute, or take a photo with certain lamas. Then, when they go outside and talk about it, they say, oh, he must be from the Buddhist Institute. But actually, there are all kinds of people who come from the Buddhist Institute, because every day there's a constant stream of people here, among so many who truly possesses the authentic qualities of the Dharma and who does not. It is very hard to tell. So, from a personal perspective, we should be careful when relying on a spiritual teacher. This is one aspect. There is also another aspect. When Ananda was by the Buddha's side, he was always thinking about the well-being of sentient beings. Looking at other stories about Ananda, we can see whenever the Buddha wanted to benefit sentient beings, Ananda was extremely accommodating in this regard. This also applies to the attendants of some lamas, or those who are by the side of a lama, Khenpo or Khenmo. Those who are around Dharma teachers should also pay attention to this. Because no matter what kind of person it is, the people around them are generally very important. If the people around a lama are very wise, insightful, and highly capable individuals, then that lama's words, actions, efforts to spread the Dharma benefit beings more exceptional. If the people around are all sorts of different types, just as it is described in the Advice to Kings, especially those who love to flatter or gossip about right and wrong, then the lama's conduct and behavior will also gradually be influenced and shaped. Therefore, as someone who is very close to a lama, if you are fortunate enough to have a spiritual lama in your life, if he truly possesses the qualities of a Dharma teacher, you should not treat him as your personal property. Because this lama may have many sentient beings to care for. And if there are many sentient beings, regardless of his actions, one should always consider the benefit of all beings. If just 1, 2, or even 3 people try to control things gradually, it will have a very significant impact on the lama's activities. Nowadays, in many places, some disciples do indeed actually hold a great deal of considerable power. Whether the lama meets people or speaks to them or does anything at all, Even when it comes to distributing his own possessions, he has to look at the faces of those around him to see whether they agree or not. If they don't agree, he may have his own thoughts, but still, I have encountered many such attendants of various kinds in the past. Because of the power these attendants hold, when it reaches a certain point, at first these attendants also stayed by the Lama's side and they had compassion. But gradually they started to control his power and possessions, and eventually they took control of everything. In the end, the Lama no longer had any real freedom. This kind of situation is truly very detrimental, especially for many lamas from various schools. The lamas should be very compassionate, but after all, on the surface, they may appear just like ordinary beings in the desire realm and are also influenced by those around them. At such times, the lama should be given a certain degree of authority. There shouldn't be too much control imposed. If there is too much control from a Buddhist perspective, this fault could be extremely serious. Because as a lama, in some sutras and commentaries, they are regarded as equal to the Buddha. Whether disciples have such realization or not is really hard to say. So I just think the devoted way Ananda served the Buddha diligently should be a model for many attendants of lamas. The people around, those who do voluntary works, should also be included. For example, when the Lama meets someone or when someone comes to visit, some people only pay attention to the Lama, thinking, the Lama is working so incredibly hard, the Lama is so very tired, the Lama is truly ill, the Lama is about to pass away, and so on. There are all kinds of thoughts and things like this. Back when we were at the Chengdu garden, you see, there was a time when His Holiness was resting, and then a few more lay practitioners came by. I said, His Holiness is resting. Later, His Holiness, I'm not sure who told him, heard about it. Then His Holiness criticized us. He said, in the future, don't say that I'm resting. When people come, if it's appropriate to meet them, I should meet them. But sometimes when we let people meet Him, His Holiness isn't very happy either. Sometimes just being around Him can be really quite difficult. It's hard to grasp the right balance in these situations, as sometimes, on the appearance, even after he says something himself, he doesn't acknowledge it later. This is also a bit... They are so happy. One moment they say they want this, and the next moment they say they want that. Of course, it's possible that we really... With different teachers, the attitude of the people around you is very important. If the people around you have a bad attitude, you will naturally develop wrong views about this teacher. This person is so mean, so fierce. But if this person is especially compassionate and gentle and asks you what kind of blessed object you want, and is especially compassionate and understanding, then even the most unruly and difficult people, when they observe the behavior of those around them, they are naturally influenced and transformed accordingly. They naturally cultivate a sense of renunciation and a feeling of compassion. I quite often reflect on myself, even though I used to spend a lot of time with my teacher, and we experienced many moments together. It was really, truly hard to notice myself during that process. But looking back now, it seems that in many cases, there were certainly some things that I didn't do particularly well at all, but there was nothing I could do about it. I did try my best at the time, but some things were still not done perfectly. Perhaps they are worth repenting for as well. But truly, I hope that in all our different places, since there are quite a lot of people listening to these teachings, many people have made contributions to the teachers, have done voluntary work and all sorts of things. Another thing is that those around the teacher must be harmonious. I see that many people around the teacher are not very harmonious. What is the reason for this? They don't recognize the guru as a master who belongs to all sentient beings, and when they do voluntary work, they are somewhat at odds with each other. There is some competition between them, and each has their own issues with the others. This happens in their words, actions, and in many other aspects. This is something that can be clearly seen. Actually, this is not very reasonable. If you can generate a good intention, do so within your capacity. No need to act like worldly people, where in front of the leader there are all sorts of various different opinions, namely A, B, and C, arguing with each other, starting to compete with one another. This is not a good thing. Whoever generates the intention should be the one to do it. Everyone else should be able to rejoice in it as well. This way might be a little bit better. Otherwise, in this case, some teachers, if they are a bit more blunt like me, maybe people wouldn't dare act like this in front of them. Some teachers, if they are more compassionate like Avalokiteshvara, a bit more kind-hearted, it seems that the disciples around them are all like people who keep their horns hidden in their pockets. They all, what does it mean to keep horns in your pocket? So if the disciples nearby are very complicated, others often can't clearly see their own merits. But when it comes to faults, people spot them. Because the characteristic of ordinary people is being especially skilled at seeing faults. So once they look, it's always, oh, this person doesn't get along. Oh, there are conflicts between them. Even when there aren't any conflicts, they still think are conflicts. So in this kind of situation, we should definitely learn from the example of Ananda. Here I might have mentioned these things in between. One is the aspect of learning from Ananda, and another is his respect for all the disciples and his reverence for the Buddha. These are things we should learn from. Although it's not mentioned much here, but we've also seen it additionally mentioned in other stories as well. Why has Ananda always been like this? There is a good reason for this as well, indeed. Next, Venerable Ananda said, even though I am like this, the Buddha has always treated me very well, but I still haven't attained the fruit of being free from outflows. Because of this, I couldn't subdue the spell of Suvara, which is the mantra of Matangi's daughter, and so under her influence, in the end, there was nothing I could do. I was taken to the house of lust. I became immersed in that house of lust. As for this house of lust, some great masters have explained it as a place that might generally have some entertainment, a place just like that. But in Tibetan, it specifically refers to a brothel. That's what it means. Perhaps at that time, Matangi's daughter, Matangi was indeed her mother. Matangi is her mother's name, and Matangi's daughter should be the daughter's name. Actually, when I read the Tibetan text, I've recently been translating the Matangi Sutra. There's a very short version, but during the process of translating, Venerable Ananda seemed rather pitiful at that time because Matangi's daughter was fetching water by the riverbank. And after she saw him, for a long time, she kept on harassing him, constantly following and trailing after him. No matter if Ananda went out for alms or to teach, she just wouldn't let go and followed him every day. Because of this, later on, he also became Ananda appeared to be quite annoyed. Later, as for her mother, at first she didn't use any spells or incantations. She thought that Shakyamuni Buddha and the Arhats. But in the end, Matangi's daughter kept fasting, saying, if I can't have him, I want to die. Generally, women often use their lives to threaten people. Saying this may offend many. I shouldn't say that. But maybe it's really the case. Even now, in the end, her mother had no choice but to use this spell. After using the spell, but at that time, the spell wasn't actually very powerful. Ananda still wanted to escape. In the end, her mother closed all the doors and windows. Her daughter also said, as long as you close all the doors and windows before it gets dark, when night falls, he will become my husband. I have a way, this is what she said. But later, after the Buddha blessed him, Ananda had already attained liberation. So this is also a kind of descriptive form of, especially, let me mention this here as well. Some women, it should be themselves. I think monastics would never have this issue. But for lay people, some really do actually have it. Their own insatiable greed, if it is not transformed on the right path. No matter whether it's with your very own family or indeed anyone else, there should always be a proper and respectful way to resolve your emotions, family, and life issues. This is indeed a better approach. First, you must not use your life to threaten others at all. This is especially frightening. In today's society, if people keep saying things like this, honestly, at a certain point you might die without even realizing it. Just the day before yesterday, there was a Korean celebrity, a very famous star. She committed suicide. It was truly a pity. I think on one hand, the news said it was depression. Her name was Sully, right? This is the first time I've heard of her. I don't really pay attention to these things, but it's true that people all over the world are very concerned about it. When she was 11 or 12, she started going out for training. By the age of 15, she was already famous. In the end, at 25, it was said to be depression, and she took her own life. But looking at the whole process, actually, she was just someone who became famous. There are countless other people who also suffer from depression. According to international statistics, for some women, female suicides, especially those related to emotional issues, are relatively more common. In this case, if your mind isn't resilient enough, If you haven't truly found your true heart, then even the most precious life in this entire world can end up being given up in the end. So we should also, on one hand, we should very much consider those who have indeed died in this way. Actually, for them, they probably lacked nothing in this world. Whether it was sights, sounds, smells, tastes, or touch, they should have had all of these things. But because of their own attachments, and not having practiced well, on the other hand, perhaps each and every person, when they are quite young or in their early years, or when they are going through life, should often pray to the Guru and the three jewels. This is very important. Also, we should frequently tame our own minds, and indeed, we need to practice regularly. If we are able to practice, these things become much easier. What we call depression is the most frightening thing nowadays. Many people, including some among the practitioners, I've heard that there are such cases as well. Mainly, from the Buddhist perspective, it may have something to do with attachment, because the pressure is very great. They feel as if others truly don't care about them at all. They feel that they have absolutely no value in living, and they think that if they keep on living like this, there is no meaning in being alive, and so on. All kinds of such discriminating thoughts keep increasing more and more. In the end, they can't control themselves, and eventually, if we can't contribute to society, our family, or those around us, if we can't make contribution, we should harm ourselves, hang ourselves, or self-harm. These thoughts are unreasonable. But sometimes, when people are feeling impulsive, when they are especially sad or truly in despair, people can end up doing many very unwise things. So whether you are a practitioner or not, everyone should regularly pray to the Guru and the three jewels. At the same time, if you find yourself experiencing such troubling emotions, you must not, in a moment of anger or based on your own discriminating thoughts, you can do anything that is unreasonable. This is something everyone should pay attention to regularly. When I carefully read the story of Matangi, I truly realize that sentient beings have all kinds of karmic forces. In fact, in this world today, sometimes from a young age, we are very attached to external appearances. On top of that, we tend to ignore the true nature of our own minds, constantly neglecting it. Our values in life are not really given much importance by anyone. In this way, our true values may end up being something extremely vague and insubstantial, yet we take them the meaning of existence. As a result, others get trapped in difficulties. Things we do are pessimistic. So in this regard, as Buddhists, I believe we are much better off in many ways. Although Buddhists also have afflictions, even if so, we can adjust ourselves in a short time. Moreover, Buddhism places special emphasis on dealing with afflictions. The esoteric tradition aims to recognize afflictions. The exoteric approach aims to counteract them. In this way, whenever afflictions always truly arise, everyone may temporarily experience the same kind of afflictions as ordinary people. But when the mind truly calms down itself, we have some methods to adjust ourselves. This is very important indeed in the current present time. So now, actually, around us, whether people have absolutely no faith or truly lack such mental adjustment and are in a rather bad state, indeed, we Buddhists must use our own methods to benefit those around us. In this way, we can truly benefit many people. I always think, including when teaching the Bodhicariyavatara, when teaching these Dharma teachings, sometimes I myself, on one hand, am quite arrogant and proud, but on the other hand, I say this very honestly. Perhaps many people's minds have truly been adjusted and transformed. If we didn't have the spread of the Dharma, if we didn't have the opportunity to encounter the Dharma, perhaps some people present here today might not necessarily be here today, but perhaps in another world. Truly indeed, if you hadn't encountered the sacred Dharma, maybe right now you would be in another realm. Because nowadays many people feel disappointed with life and seem to have very little interest in continuing to live. But after encountering the Dharma, they feel that the things they did before seem very trivial and not really worthwhile. Some even, in the end, become truly outstanding people in spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. So I think the Dharma truly is unique in this regard, with its own distinctive qualities. Oh, what was I talking about? Let me just say a little bit more about this today. It's okay if I can't finish everything, because one does not know the true nature of reality. Why am I so completely controlled by this spell? In fact, it's because I fundamentally do not know the ultimate truth. I not realize my mind, nor the Tathagatagarbha, understood the profound secret of ultimate emptiness. After Ananda encountered adverse condition, he developed a strong aspiration to seek the Dharma. He prayed, "May the world-honored one, out of compassion and mercy, take pity and give teachings to sentient beings, including the arhats, the fourfold assembly of disciples, and ourselves. The path of shamatha, which specifically refers to samadhi, the path of meditative concentration, the way of meditation, so that even ikantikas, sentient beings who have severed their roots of goodness, of course Ananda and the others definitely are not ichantikas, they have not severed their roots goodness. All of us arhats are seeking the Dharma. Ananda himself has not attained arhatship, and we too are seeking the Dharma. And then there are the ichantikas, those who have severed their roots of goodness, their milicha. Hui actually means to destroy. It is indeed a verb. Let those who have severed their roots of goodness destroy their miliche. The miliche refers to their stubborn wrong views, their deeply entrenched evil views. So whether these people have severed their roots of goodness or lack the right conditions. In the Mahayana tradition, true severance of the roots of goodness is not acknowledged, but among those attached to wrong views, those sentient beings with heavy karmic obstacles, we must destroy their evil views. After Ananda finished saying this, he prostrated before the Buddha, bowing with his 5 limbs. At this moment, the entire assembly was filled with eager anticipation. Their bodies and minds were all here. Eager means they were especially longing and yearning in their hearts. It's like when you are extremely thirsty and you desperately hope to get water. In the same way, they were especially eager to receive the Dharma. This describes their state of mind. And anticipation is very much like little baby birds waiting patiently to be fed, their physical expressions clearly showing their eagerness. Were also especially sincere, gazing intently and looking at the Buddha with deep reluctance to look away. That was the state of their bodies. Then with reverence they awaited the Buddha's instruction. At this moment, everyone wanted to hear what Shakyamuni Buddha would teach them, all eager to listen to his teachings. So when we listen to the Dharma, this state of body and mind is very important. When listening to the Dharma, first, when seeking the Dharma, we should be like this. And when listening to the Dharma, we should also be like this. This is the state we should have when listening to the Dharma here. In fact, our state here is also very good. Everyone, no matter how long the talk goes on, still seems to maintain a pretty good state. It should be exactly like this. Next, then, the next section actually has quite a lot to cover. Or should we perhaps stop right here? All right, let's stop right here for today.
Bandara Bandara